Yo, what's going on? Mike from Mike Talk Sports. In honor of Raul Rosas Jr. going up against Christian Rodriguez at UFC 287 on the main card, let's break down how good is this prodigy, Raul Rosas Jr., the 18-year-old. So Rosas Jr. made his Dana White Contender Series debut at 17 years old. He's currently 18 years old at 7-0. Guys, this is insanely impressive. I see this downplayed consistently on social media. First and foremost, the mental fortitude it takes to be an MMA fighter. For him to already develop those mental traits by the time he's 16 years old on the regional scene is absolutely incredible. When I first started watching Rosas Jr., the very first thing I thought was, damn, I need to show a casual Raul Rosas Jr. Why do I say that? Not necessarily because it's an 18-year-old prodigy that is in the UFC. No, I say that because he is a rare example of an extraordinarily entertaining grappler. Most casual fans of the sport just like when it's a stand and bang match. They hate grappling at any cost. Rosas Jr. is one of the most active grapplers I've genuinely ever seen in the sport. He's such an entertaining grappler. Let's break down his grappling technique right now. First off, when we look at grapplers who don't have this incredible striking game and aren't extremely developed in the striking realm and very raw in that aspect, which is to be expected with Rosas Jr., we will break down his striking in a little bit, but again, it is pretty raw. He's a very young guy. We always associate those guys with guys who really telegraph their takedown attempts, that really it's not necessarily easy to stuff their takedown attempts and their attempts to get the fight to the ground, but realistically, they're going to do a blast double leg, blast single leg, or they're going to get to the clinch and they're going to chain together a takedown. This is not the case at all with Rosas Jr. We already saw on the Contender Series him going up against a guy, Mando Gutierrez, who is a good fighter in his own right. We just saw him on The Ultimate Fighter sparring with Conor McGregor. So Gutierrez is a legit opponent, and Rosas Jr., the way he really disguised his takedown attempts were absolutely incredible in this fight, and that's really the first thing you will notice about Rosas Jr. He had a spinning heel kick into a takedown attempt. Later in the fight, he had this beautiful moment where he charged forward, he had this feint flying knee right into a double leg takedown and got it immediately. This guy in top control is really good at defending submissions as well. We've seen in a couple of his fights now that his opponents are ferociously trying to submit him off of their back, go for that armbar off of the back, go for that guillotine off of the back, and Rosas Jr. is so strong, he's so resilient, and his jiu-jitsu is already so advanced to the point where I think future opponents will look at him and go, man, we just got to get back to our feet. We're not even going to try to mess with this guy in the grappling realm. He's already gotten the attention of Aljamain Sterling and Merab Dvalishvili. They've already trained together, and apparently Rosas Jr. did very good in those grappling sequences, and he really does have that Aljamain Sterling-esque grappling game where I look at Rosas Jr. Is he going to hit the mat and win an NCAA championship for wrestling? No, he's not, but he's a great MMA grappler. He understands MMA grappling, which is so impressive because you look at a guy like Bo Nickel, for example, who is a decorated national champion wrestler at Penn State, and even he early in his MMA career has somewhat struggled with getting the fight to the ground because grappling in MMA is so different from grappling in wrestling, in Greco-Roman wrestling, and even just in jiu-jitsu, sambo, and any other combat sport that uses grappling. MMA really utilizes every single grappling technique, and Rosas Jr. is a guy who already has this down. One of my favorite techniques in the grappling realm that Rosas Jr. really does incredibly is his body triangles, which makes him so sticky on the ground right away. Instead of really focusing on the hand manipulation and the wrist control, which is very important, Rosas Jr. really finds his legs and wraps around his legs of his opponents like a boa constrictor with those insane body triangles and those body locks, consistently going for submissions and transitions on the ground. Once you get to the UFC, you see significantly less times where guys get extremely dominant positions on the ground because, of course, you're facing higher level of competition. But even then, Rosas Jr. does such a great job of getting top mount, of getting side side saddle, of getting back mount, and even flattening out his opponents. In his Dana White Contender Series fight, he consistently flattened out his opponent, so he makes it look easy, and his main submission that he loves going to is going to be that rear naked choke. Really nice at locking it in. He also has really good arm bars, and he's just super creative on the ground. I know he knows some very advanced submissions as well. His stand-up isn't bad. We've seen some leg kicks from him look pretty good, and his punches in guard and defense isn't bad. He really does not move his head, which makes me nervous, and if he was in a 3-round war on the feet, realistically, right now at the moment, he'd probably still lose because he's just so inexperienced on the feet right now at the moment. He has nice accuracy with his punches and his boxing, but the thing is that makes me pretty nervous is he does lack that technique to really generate power in his punches or in his strikes in general. We did see with that spinning heel kick, it was probably the weakest spinning heel kick I've ever seen. Not in terms of technique, not in terms of where it landed. It was very impressive, but in terms of the force it generated, it just was not a good position in which to set up a spinning heel kick. He really didn't have the momentum going in his way, and he didn't have his feet planted into the ground. I think if the UFC can really build Rosas Jr. in the correct way and get him a bunch of guys who honestly are grapplers, I would like to see Rosas Jr. keep fighting grapplers because I do think he is a prodigy in the grappling realm, and he will take guys who potentially have grappled as long as Rosas Jr. has lived on this earth, guys who have been doing jiu-jitsu for 18 years. I still think Rosas Jr. has a chance against guys like that. So again, build him up against grapplers. By the time he reaches 22, 23 years old, I think his striking will get to a point where he'll have some pop in his boxing. He'll have some pops in his kicks as well, and he'll really get to mix it up with the striking and with the grappling. My prediction for his career, I think pretty quickly he moves up to the 135 division, which absolute killers are in the 135 division. I think he will do really good at some points in the 135 division. It is not the best division in terms of grappling. We've seen guys like Aljamain Sterling dominate part of the 135-pound division because of that dominant MMA style of grappling, just being an absolute backpack out there and just being so sticky in the grappling exchanges. So in my opinion, Rosas Jr. goes on a tear, wins the next 3-4 fights in a row. I think he'll maybe lose 1 or 2 fights, and then he'll keep building up. In my opinion, I don't know if this kid ever becomes champion, just because most champions in MMA history are an expert at a certain martial art, which of course Rosas Jr. just joined MMA at 16, 17 years old, so he'll never get the chance to really master a martial art and just focus on a singular martial art. Really, the only other champion I could think of that has a similar story is Jon Jones, but Jon Jones showed a new level and a different level of striking and grappling once he entered the MMA cage, whereas Rosas Jr., it really is just that grappling. So I think Rosas Jr. could crack the top 5 at some point in his career. But all in all, I'm extremely impressed with Rosas Jr., and I wish him the best luck and to become the youngest UFC champion in UFC history.